The following program may contain coarse language, violence, nudity, mature subject matter, or scenes which may not be suitable for all viewers. Viewer discretion is advised.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X-Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Welcome back to the X-Zone, everyone. We're coming to you from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. If you'd like to send us an email, xzone at X-Zone Radio TV, on all social media sites, X-Zone Radio TV, and our main website, which is going to be revamped, I am told, over the weekend at www.xzoneradiotv.com. We're going to be talking about a new book that is out, X-Zone Nation. The name of the book is Demon Street, USA, The True Story of a Very Haunted House. It's a chilling and fun account of how people actually attempted to confront and vanquish a very powerful entity. The True Stories is a series of super scary events where David Rountree, who is our guest this hour, and co-author David Lunt encounter a demon who pops up in all of his, or her, frightening, hideous, when least expected, at a huge concert, at a psychic fair, in a graveyard, and in a terrified woman's house. Joining me now is David Rountree. And David, welcome to the show.
Hey, Rob. Thanks for having me on.
This sounds like a very, very spooky book. Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, Robbie and I had an encounter back in 1985 that really we couldn't really tell anybody about it. In 1985, this sort of stuff wasn't talked about. We had a young lady, Penelope, came to Robbie actually first, made contact with Robbie at a show that we were working. How Robbie and I actually met were we were both in show business together. We were doing technical support for live production. Right. Robbie was a lighting designer, lighting director. I did lighting, I did sound. I was also a technical director. So we worked a lot of shows together. How he ran into Penelope was she was talking to him at a show he was doing, and she told him about all sorts of things that were happening at his house. And Robbie's the kind of guy that people will just tell him things they wouldn't tell other people anyway. So she told him about some of the things that were occurring. She had things happening in her home. She was seeing like a party going on her front porch, and of course there was nothing there. She was having all sorts of things occur, and the final blow to her was when she had left her house and was staying at the landlord's house, and the stove started dancing, and a ripple ran across the tongue and groove wood floor and knocked her off her feet, and that's when she left and checked into a motel. So consequently, Robbie came to me at the time and asked me if there was anything I could do to help.
Right.
So we decided we were just going to go to a haunted house and see a ghost. It was kind of like a lark. Unfortunately, it wasn't exactly what we wished for when we got there.
Okay, so prior to this, had you had any experience as a paranormal researcher?
Well, I actually started doing paranormal research in 1976, but my research was from a scientific perspective. I was also, at the same time, I was trained as a Native American medicine man. At the time, I was practicing what they call coyote medicine. And Robbie came to me in the metaphysical plane to deal with this more than in the scientific plane. Back in 1976, we didn't have the technology available that we have today. So our instrumentation was rather crude. I mean, I was using a TAC 84010S reel-to-reel recorder and a microphone that looked like Elvis sang in it in the 50s. And that's what we searched for Radava voices, which is what electronic voice phenomena was referred to back in those days.
How credible, how reliable are the audio tracks that you get using, looking for EVPs? A lot of people say, "Oh, come on, it could be background sound." You send it through different digital processes. You can hear what you want to hear.
Well, that's true. There's a pareidolia effect that occurs where your brain takes chaos and turns it into order. But
right.
With today's technology, we don't even deal with that. We literally are looking at the waveforms, and if we don't hear a crystal clear voiced message in there, or a word or an utterance that's clearly discernible and understandable, we don't consider that an EVP. We just consider it interesting noise. The whole thing is I discovered what EVP actually was about 7 years ago.
All right, we're going to have a bit of a cliffhanger here, David, because we've got to take a commercial break. Exo Nation, we're talking to David Rountree this hour. Not only is he the co-author of Demon Street, but he's also the executive director of Spirit Lab. And we'll be back on the other side of this commercial break in 2 minutes as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away. Modern Esoteric, Beyond Our Senses by Brad Olson, consummates the lifology story about where humanity originates. It is the lost continents, the primitive wisdom, the mythos of creation, and the rethinking of ancient history as we are taught in academia. There is much more to the story than what we have been told. As this is the first book in the Esoteric series, Modern Esoteric starts at the beginning of time and accelerates up to this modern age. Future Esoteric is book 2 in the series and takes a forward-looking position ahead of today with an open and honest examination of the ET issue and various unexplained phenomena. To discover the writings of author Brad Olson, visit www.bradolson.com. That's www.bradolson.com. Named one of the world's greatest psychics, Elizabeth Joyce is now giving readings worldwide via Skype. Elizabeth Joyce is recognized for her clairvoyant ability to help find missing persons, her analysis of dreams, past life regression work, mediumship, and her accurate predictions. Elizabeth has been a frequent guest on the X Zone radio show with yours truly, Rob McConnell, now for several years. For an appointment with Elizabeth Joyce, call 201-934-8986 or Skype at elizabeth.joyce. And for more information, you can always visit Elizabeth Joyce online at www.new-visions.com. Exonation, David Rountree is our special guest. He is the co-author of Demon Street. Their website is www.demonstreetusa.com. Let's go back to that investigation that you did way back when, and you and I were talking during the commercial break, and you said that this book was about a house in Florida, and when you're investigating the paranormal as you now better understand it, looking back, take us through some of the haunting events that you actually saw that brought you to write this book.
Well, probably one of the first things that struck me was when we first entered the property was the change in the atmosphere, the actual feeling that you got. To me, it was like someone put a grand piano on my back. The air became very thick. You could almost cut it with a knife. And there was this feeling of foreboding, almost like the whole property was holding its breath, but watching. And you got that feeling that you were being watched. And the second thing occurred when we were actually in Penelope's house. And in Florida, they have these old-fashioned multi-jalousied windows with a hand crank. And it's a mechanical contraption that you crank the crank and the windows open, and then you crank it the other way and they close. Robbie looked over and noticed that the jalousie window was opening very slowly, but the crank wasn't turning. So I had reached over and grabbed the crank because I figured, well, the crank's disconnected. It's not attached to the mechanics that open the windows, and cranked the window close again. So it was connected. So literally we witnessed a violation in physics in front of our eyes where all of these mechanical linkages weren't affected by the windows opening and closing. And I literally tried to manually force the window open and close by moving the windows, and it wouldn't work. It didn't open or close. It was solid. So that was something we couldn't explain, and I think that was probably the first startling moment for me where I realized that, we had something very strange going on there.
Why is it you think that only certain people see these strange events and the majority of people don't?
It's a funny thing because everyone associated with us did see these things. We were by far not the only witnesses to some of the phenomena that occurred. We ended up, through the book, assembling a group of individuals to attempt to deal with this thing because I had never dealt with anything like it before and no one else had. And this was before the internet, it was before computers, before cell phones. I mean, we just didn't have that kind of technology. So it was a challenge to find people, number one, who had any knowledge in this sort of thing. But people sort of came to us, like, for no explanation. They would come up and they would offer us help, or they would give us information, or give us some article or artifact that may be useful in what we were doing. So it was more of a spiritual journey than it was a physical one, and yet it was very physical in the fact that we were literally here in reality dealing with it and seeing it and experiencing it with our own eyes.
What kind of research was conducted into the history of the house as well as the history of the occupants?
Well, that's a good question. Robbie actually did a great deal of background research, and it's a funny thing. We didn't have Google or anything back then, so It was a lot of footwork. He went over to Levy County, where the early property owner, which was Clevis's grandfather, who initially owned the house and the property, and he found out that this gentleman owned probably more than 3/4 of Levy County at one time. In fact, he owned a large chunk of property that at one time there was a little town called Rosewood, which was the subject of a movie in which the entire town was wiped out in a racist event that took place, I think in the 30s maybe. They actually made a movie about it. There was one of the black residents was wrongly accused of raping a white woman. And he was somehow involved in that. But we could find no mention of him personally. And he was a prominent citizen of Levy County with being a big landowner. There was almost like no record of him ever existing other than the land ownership records. Now, a prominent person that has that kind of wealth is generally in the newspaper a lot, generally in public town hall meetings. No records whatsoever of this person even existing. So in the South, they have this kind of thing where if you kind of ignore things and sweep them under the carpet, they go away. And that's exactly what happened with Clevis's grandfather. So he was involved in some kind of shady shenanigans at some point before Ronnie was ever born. And more research was done. It turns out Ronnie's grandfather was in actuality his father. his grandfather had raped his mother, and that's how Ronnie Clevis was conceived.